Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Camey, and welcome to Risk Management Professionals webinar series. Today, I will be going over the topic of preparing for a successful HAZOP/LOPA. Let's get started. This webinar series is part of RMP's ongoing outreach program. RMP's core competencies and expertise reside in EPA RMP, OSHA PSM, CalARP, and SEMS program development. This also includes HAZOP/LOPA studies and other hazard identification techniques, and a variety of other process safety and regulatory standards. Today I will go over the importance of a quality PHA. I'll define the objectives and approach for a HAZOP study. I'll go over some planning, preparation, and venue tips, while finishing up with a few final readiness tips, with the summary of everything I will go over today, and I'll have a Q&A session at the end as well. Let's begin with the importance of a quality PHA. There are many tools to utilize for a PHA, such as what if and checklists. However, the team-oriented brainstorming sessions associated with HAZOP studies are typically considered the driving force of the industry. A Hazards and Operability, aka HAZOP study, is a structured and systematic technique for system examination and risk management. For potential hazards identified in a HAZOP that need further investigation, the layer of protection analysis, aka LOPA, is included to identify appropriate reliability targets for key safety features. Although the process of performing this type of study has not changed significantly over the years, it is important to note that the expectation for quality has increased, and thus is important to get the most out of your HAZOP. Now let's define the importance of understanding objectives and the overall approach. The core objective for all hazard identification exercises such as HAZOP/LOPA is to uncover potential weaknesses/vulnerabilities in system design or operation that could result in an undesirable outcome, such as injury, environmental impact, equipment damage, operational impact, or compromised company reputation. The specific focus for a HAZOP/LOPA can vary significantly from project to project. For example, the focus varies for capital projects in the early stages versus latter stages, or varies for initial HAZOP/LOPAs being performed on an operability facility versus in a revalidation of this facility. However, overall, the general objectives are to identify causes leading to potential safety, environmental, or operability issues, as well as recommended changes to actually overcome these issues. The objectives are also to provide training to personnel to improve operations and potential hazards of the facility, and finally to provide background for preparation of safety programs and procedures. Understanding the correct approach for a HAZOP study that is extremely important in making sure that the session time is of the highest possible quality. It is important to understand the team members' specialties and how their experience with the system can lead to an effective study. The session time is extremely important since it will have the representation from key groups such as engineering and operations, which are some of the busiest groups on a project's operating facility. Therefore, the correct approach will ensure that the session time will be spent effectively producing a quality HAZOP study. It is also important to understand the type of study being performed, whether that is for a capital project or an operating facility. So for capital projects, they typically have fundamental design vulnerabilities that the HAZOP/LOPA is being used to help resolve. Oftentimes, these projects have larger multidisciplinary teams with numerous stakeholders who wish to participate, some of which may be widely spread geographically. Additionally, these projects tend to encounter significant financial pressures to accelerate project schedule, but also have significant financial impacts associated with design mistakes not caught during the HAZOP, which could in fact lead to challenges later on in the design process. In the earlier stages of capital projects, the focus is more likely to be on higher consequence scenarios in order to support decisions regarding fundamental design issues. These design details and process safety information are often not fully available. Now, in the later stages of the projects, they will have more design information accessible, and the focus of the project will now shift towards finalizing and vetting those design details. Switching over to the operating facilities, the main objectives are actually quite different. The key focus is to meet regulatory requirements and ensure that the process is operating sufficiently and within acceptable risk thresholds. There is less focus on optimizing and simplifying the design as all of the equipment has already been purchased. Additionally, items that need to be discussed that need not be addressed during a capital project are items such as the incident investigation, the management of change, facility siting, damage mechanism review, safeguard, protection analysis, external events, etc., etc. And these studies typically involve much smaller teams with individuals that have a wider range of knowledge and experience with the process. Now let's go into some useful tips for planning your HAZOP/LOPA study. In order to have a successful HAZOP, the selection of personnel for the team and the initial scheduling is extremely important. There are a few disciplines that are required to be represented by the PSM/RMP, and I will go into further details on those roles specifically. But it's also important to note that scheduling early is of the utmost importance because the individuals required to be part of the HAZOP are typically some of the busiest, and their full attention during the sessions is extremely critical in the effectiveness of each session. So with early scheduling, individuals who are required to be present during a HAZOP can plan accordingly to be well prepared for the study so that the session time is spent working through the hazards and brainstorming rather than waiting on information that was not well prepared ahead of time. So the key disciplines that are typically represented in a HAZOP team are presented here. The HAZOP facilitator is the driving force organizing the sessions and ensuring that the team is properly prepared and is required. Now for some sessions, a team scribe/recorder is included in order to increase the efficiency of the sessions to assist the facilitator in leading the analysis. However, they are not always required. The other required disciplines include a process/project engineer, operations, and maintenance as they work on the project/process being analyzed on a frequent basis and can provide important insight on what the design is intended to do and what is actually in the field, which is why they are required by the PSM/RMP. Other experts that may provide insightful and important information can be included in the sessions if the facilitator and project/facility coordinator find that their inclusion would actually improve the quality of the HAZOP study. So the role of the HAZOP facilitator is one of the most important because it ensures that the study is performed effectively and in a timely manner. Although it is critical for the facilitator to be well versed and familiar with the system in question, their role provides more value towards the organization of the system rather than the technical input of the system that best falls on the responsibility of the other experts on the team with years of experience working with the system. The facilitator helps organize the study by performing the HAZOP preparation. Now this includes defining a clear objective so that all invited parties can prepare properly once they become aware of the goal of the study. This also includes scheduling the sessions and inviting the proper personnel so that the time is spent effectively, and defining the location of the HAZOP to ensure that all participants can perform the analysis effectively and that the location provides all necessary amenities and components for the team. The facilitator also provides the HAZOP team with proper training for those who are not aware of the HAZOP methodology so that they may effectively use their experience and knowledge with the system to provide insight on potential hazards. This is very important to start the HAZOP study because it prevents confusion later on in the HAZOP, which can limit the involvement of newer team members. They are also aware of the timeline predetermined during the preparation phase of the HAZOP study and must keep the flow of the study going to ensure that the timeline is in fact maintained. This is actually extremely important during sessions where scenarios are investigated and design discussions occur that go on for longer than necessary during the HAZOP. It is important to note that the HAZOP is meant to review hazards of the current system but not have design discussions performed during the session that may be performed outside of these HAZOP sessions. It's also the responsibility of the facilitator to be properly qualified and have the proper HAZOP experience to understand the methodology well enough to organize it in an effective manner to get the most out of the study. This includes understanding proper regulations for projects and operating facilities, understanding the HAZOP methodology and software, and properly adhering to the standards that must be met to produce a quality and thorough HAZOP study. The experience of a HAZOP methodology is important for the facilitator to understand the proper length of technical discussions that come up during key scenarios that are important in understanding all hazards within the system, but cannot drag on as a session time is limited and critical in involving all key disciplines. Finally, it is important that the facilitator must not ignore any valid concerns from all team members. Since all team members have proper experience with the system, it is important to investigate all proper concerns and thoroughly identify any potential hazards derived from these concerns. The facilitator can also be tasked with both facilitation and scribing duties depending on various parameters of the HAZOP, such as system complexity, team composition, and the size of the team. The pivotal decision-making parameter for the inclusion of a scribe is whether the additional cost of a scribe outweighs the money saved by shortening the HAZOP sessions and the subsequent documentation time. In most cases, the financial threshold for when it is more convenient to use a scribe is once the team, excluding the facilitator and scribe, exceeds about 4 individuals for a local project and 5 for a project that involves more facilitator travel costs. When a scribe is included, they are expected to be familiar with the HAZOP methodology to ensure that they can properly prepare any documentation and be effective at all times during the sessions. They must also be familiar with reading engineering drawings to properly document and identify equipment and instrumentation on the P&IDs of the system. This can help reduce the time spent looking for equipment and instrumentation during the session by displaying this useful information on a monitor presenting the P&IDs and effectively documenting the tag numbers and P&ID numbers so that they may be easily identified by all members reviewing the HAZOP. The scribe must also be familiar with the HAZOP software to reduce the session time and documentation after the study has been performed. There are many skills and shortcuts that can be learned for the HAZOP software that result in less time being spent documenting the HAZOP analysis and navigating the software, which results in more time being spent developing scenarios and analyzing the hazards. The scribe's role will be to document detailed records of items investigated and discussed during sessions to ensure that all members of the team are aware of any valid concerns and can be properly reviewed after the session concludes. This is extremely important to have a scribe that properly documents the information because it can help limit the post-session documentation time that may be required if areas of confusion are found when going through the documentation. The time spent during the session is extremely important because of the knowledge and experience of all members of the team, so the quality of the documentation during the session is important in analyzing the system effectively. The roles of the other qualified experts representing the engineering and operations of the process are that they must be well qualified and have enough experience with the system being analyzed. The quality of the PHA is reflective of the quality of the team members, and an effective selection process can help limit the possible time in a session due to team members not being aware of their roles and responsibilities. This is why scheduling early is important for a successful HAZOP, and developing a timeline is useful to achieve this. Here's an example of a useful timeline for PHA planning. As you can see, the first items to begin planning are performed well in advance of the PHA study date. Around 7 weeks before the scheduled PHA, the team invitation and schedule should be created so that all necessary participants can attend the entirety of the PHA sessions and are fully involved throughout them. This must be performed early to give ample amount of time to find the right personnel, as this ensures the quality of the PHA is met. At this time, the objectives and scope are made clear so that all participants invited can be prepared for the first session date. On week 6, it is important to complete the final design review for the proposed system. This is an important step because any last-minute design changes will result in pushing back deadlines for other aspects of the analysis. An example of this can be pushing back the completion of the P&IDs, which can ultimately leave the facilitator without an ample amount of time to properly pre-cause the system. This can result in more time being spent during the session developing scenarios, which prolongs the sessions. After the final design is reviewed, it is important for personnel to perform a P&ID walkdown to verify that the drawings accurately represent what is in the field. This is important to be done early, as the time spent during the HAZOP sessions should not be filled with field verification due to team members seeing a discrepancy on the P&ID compared to what they have seen in the field. With the proper walkdown, this can help ensure that the P&IDs are drafted correctly. It is also important to arrange a PHA venue well before the study date. This is because the location of the PHA can help improve the quality of the analysis. With ample space to perform the analysis and associated technology utilized to improve the quality of the session, the analysis can run much more smoothly compared to a last-minute venue that may have an insufficient number of monitors or possible connection issues that prevent key information being shown to effectively improve the flow of the process. A few weeks before the study date, it is important to determine what PHA tools will be used and what meeting equipment will be necessary so that all members can properly prepare for the choice of methodology, and so that the study can be performed with equipment that will improve the quality of the session and limit the disruptions that may come up during the session due to any technological or connection issues. At week 2, before the study date, it is important to begin preparing the elements of the PHA, resolve any final design reviews, and thus have the final P&ID revised and ready to go. This is important to have at this time to allow the facilitator the time to define the nodes of the system. This is important to be done early, as the week before the study is performed is meant to prepare the PHA software with any project/facility specific inputs, such as the risk ranking matrix and any templates. This final week should also be spent populating causes so that the facilitator can look through the system and locate as many hazards as possible so that they may begin the system with any questions that the team members can answer. This reduces the time spent searching for causes and ultimately getting more out of the time spent with the highly experienced team members. Since the facilitators are well experienced with the HAZOP methodology, this pre-causing can be effectively done prior to the study date and can help newer team members understand the HAZOP methodology. The P&IDs and PFDs should also be printed and distributed to all team members on the week before the study date, so that the members have the opportunity to prepare themselves for the session so that the transition between understanding the nodes and providing insight on the identified hazards can be shorter. By doing all of these tasks prior to the PHA study date, you can get more out of your HAZOP in a shorter amount of session time. Now let's go into detail on some preparation tips for your next HAZOP. One way to be well prepared for the HAZOP study is to make sure that all important information is gathered prior to the study date so that the facilitator can ensure that all required pieces of information are gathered to properly perform the study. If this information is not provided, the session time must be spent gathering this information, and the documentation for it must be as well. And that is not a valuable way to spend the time of a HAZOP study. The information that should be gathered should always be the process flow diagrams and piping and instrumentation diagrams. These pieces of information provide the facilitator with the necessary resources to develop the nodes and eventual pre-causes of the process. Therefore, the facilitator should be provided with the P&IDs a few weeks before the study date so that they may review them and provide them to the process engineers so that they can verify that they are accurate so that the disputes about the system are not made during the session. It is also important to include cause and effect diagrams and instrumentation set points so that the logic of the instrumentation analyzed during the HAZOP is accurate to what is currently used in the field and can be documented accordingly. Incident reports, management of changes, PSSR documentation, and previous HAZOP recommendation statuses are also important to ensure that all changes to the system are well documented so that all invited parties are aware of any potential hazards that were removed and what led to them being removed. While reviewing the information, It is important to look out for any common design gaps in the P&IDs. This can include gaps in the P&ID information, specifically the absence of key information, such as temperature, pressure, and material of the equipment, which are needed to properly identify hazards throughout the system, the absence of equipment tag numbers, which can lead to holes in documentation and confusion later on in the review process, and the absence of piping specifications, including size, material, and design pressure, which are needed to analyze the system. The common design gaps for control valves can be the absence of failure positions occurring from loss of air, power, or hydraulic pressure, actuator type, sizing, and finally their set points. These gaps can prevent crucial hazards from being identified and proper documentation being performed, which can limit the quality of the study. Common design gaps for pumps can include the absence of a blocked-in discharge pressure, the possibility of reverse flow, and any auto start functions due to a certain flow or pressure being achieved. By understanding these common design gaps and ensuring that they are addressed prior to the study, the session time can be spent more effectively and limit the disruption spent looking for this information during the session. It is also important to understand what potential detailed discussions can occur during a HAZOP study so that the proper information can be gathered prior to the sessions. Discussions regarding general process condition changes can include the loss of flow or potential for more flow, a low or higher temperature, and safety limits resulting in near or long-term damage. For heat exchangers or coolers, the discussion of impact of loss of heating/cooling or loss of cooler flange may also arise. Discussions on instrumentation may involve the protection system set points, alarm set points and location, and the alarm effects, including how audible they are and for any flashing light indications. Discussions on tanks may include vent locations and resulting hazards with them, tank maintenance and draining, materials of construction, as well as secondary containment, including draining requirements. The HAZOP facilitator should have the experience to understand how to request/prepare this information prior to the study and how long these discussions should last during the sessions to ensure that the progress of the study can be effectively maintained while still addressing these important discussion details. Now I'm going to talk about some tips for the selection of your HAZOP venue. When selecting the venue, it is important to note that the orientation of the team is important to an effective study. The scribe and facilitator should be located next to one another so that any discussions regarding proper documentation can be performed quickly. The members should be located so that their view of the main screen displaying the HAZOP software is clear, so that it limits any potential distractions. This orientation style depicted here has proven to optimize participation from all members, resulting in an engaging environment from all members. It is also important for the venue to provide enough space for a computer for a scribe to present session notes or any key information such as P&IDs, and a computer for the facilitator to effectively take notes and parking lot any potential discussion sessions that are made during the session that need more time to elaborate on. It is also important for the venue to accommodate refreshments and lunch to allow the team to effectively perform the study when sessions are scheduled at an early time, and you want all members to remain engaged by the latter end of the day. When performing a successful HAZOP, some members that are required to be present during the study may not be able to attend the session in person. Therefore, the option to include remote team members is essential for making sure that proper representation is present. To ensure that the remote members can be effectively involved in the discussions, it is important to ensure that there are adequate monitors displaying the information documented from the session, adequate communication to online members, such as a loud enough speaker and a microphone placed so that all personnel at the venue may effectively communicate to the remote team members. It is also important to provide adequate connections for power and communications so that all members can access important information as necessary and that there is sufficient bandwidth to present the information to remote members. It is also important to arrive early the day of the study to ensure that the equipment is sufficient and can be connected to ensure that the study can be performed and is accessible for remote members. Cameras can also be utilized to help drive conversations between members at the venue and remote members. Now let's go over some final readiness tips. To ensure that you are ready to perform a HAZOP, the facilitator must organize the information and prepare the worksheet to document the HAZOP study. This includes determining the nodes and pre-causing the worksheet for each node, determining key consequence categories and creating the deviation matrix, preloading the computer with deviation templates, LOPA data tables, risk ranking matrix, and key causes, and gathering checklists and industry guidelines to meet all standards and regulations to adhere to when performing a HAZOP study. The facilitator's final step is to predefine questions that may arise after reviewing the information provided to them regarding the system. These questions should be asked and answered when they come up within the study. For example, questions regarding information on the PNID should be asked and addressed when introducing and describing the node to the HAZOP team. These questions can help the facilitator improve their understanding of the system and thus reduce the session time being spent going through the nodes. On the day of the HAZOP study, it is important to print out and bring important information regarding the process being analyzed. This includes bringing and providing training materials such as key facility siting and human factors points, and the overall training of the HAZOP methodology for any team members that are new to this type of analysis, LOPA tables so that the team may understand the transition from qualitative work in the HAZOP study to the quantitative work in the LOPA study, the risk ranking matrix so that team members can have an easier time deciding upon the severity and likelihood of the scenarios, and finally, printed copies of the PNIDs and PFDs so that the team members are able to follow along with the scenarios and make necessary notes on the copies. By bringing these materials on the day of the HAZOP study, this can lead to a more productive session and more engagement from your team members. Now let's summarize what I went over today. The most important components to a successful HAZOP study is to focus on efficiency and quality. This session should have provided plenty of tips to properly prepare for a session so that the time spent during it can be focused on the scenarios and their respective hazards. It is also important to understand the type of approach for a HAZOP study, whether that is for a capital project versus an operating facility. To reiterate, capital projects focus on optimizing the process design with the goal of minimizing the costs associated with the design and operations, and minimizing any issues with the startup of the projects. On the other hand, operating facilities perform a HAZOP with the goal of identifying and mitigating risks associated with the facility. They focus on minimizing vulnerabilities while addressing regulatory requirements. It is important to develop a schedule early to make sure that all team members are given adequate time to prepare and attend all sessions so that the right people are present during the HAZOP study. It's also important to ensure that the correct venue can be selected to provide the best environment for the HAZOP team and a lengthy timeline to guide the process to ensure that the team is ready to go on the first day of the study. It is also imperative that the proper documentation is provided and performed prior to the study date so that the facilitator may organize and prepare the information to reduce the session time that is spent on any potential design issues or PNID discrepancies found during the study. By following all of the preparation tips, this will help you maximize your investment on HAZOP/LOPA and ensure that the project/facility benefits from it. Thank you very much for listening. Are there any questions?